Welcome to the ICAPGen video, Documentation and Source Citations. Hello, my name is Diana Elder. I am an accredited genealogist professional specializing in the Gulf South region of the United States. For the first part of this presentation, let's talk about reasons why you should actually cite your sources. How about to evaluate and analyze each source located? As we research, we'll be better researchers if we take the time to create a source citation the first time we look at a source. It helps us to evaluate the information in that source and to analyze it better when we have to create a source citation. Another reason for citing our sources is to prove our research findings and analysis. If we're going to show other people that we have done reasonably exhaustive research, we have to have all of our findings backed up with a good source citation. One of the main reasons that we might want to cite a source is to relocate the source and enable others to locate the source. There's nothing more irritating than seeing a note and not being able to get back to the actual document or record that you originally found. When we create source citations and put those into our research reports, it shows reliability of the source. We're able to show that it's an original source versus an index or derivative source, and we're able to show that our research is sound. Citing our sources demonstrates the research steps and shows the scope of research. As we are writing our report and we cite each step with a good source citation, our readers will know that we took the appropriate steps in this research, and it will give more credibility to our findings. We also need to consider the fact that we will have to give proper credit to work not our own as we present our findings. We may be citing a family history book written many years before. We may be citing an internet source, but we need to make sure that we're always giving proper credit to something that we did not create. Amy Harris said in her chapter on document and source citation, careful attention to source citation both during research and when writing will guarantee that the researcher does not inadvertently plagiarize another's work. We would never want to be accused of plagiarizing or taking someone else's work, so careful attention to source citation will guarantee that we do not do that. The ethics of citation are important for us to also consider. The Chicago Manual of Style gives us this excellent quote: "Ethics, copyright laws, and courtesy to readers require authors to identify the sources of direct quotations and of any facts or opinions not generally known or easily checked." The Chicago Manual of Style also gives us important guidelines. If we are quoting 3 or more words, then we must use quotations, and if we have a longer quote, then we should set that off in a block quotation. So how do you know what you should cite when you should include a source citation for a quote? Well, anytime that you have a fact that is not easily known, then you need to create a source citation for that. For example, if you were stating that the Civil War ended in 1865, you would not need to include a source citation for that fact because that's generally known. But if you were to include a specific fact about the county of your research in 1865, then that's an example of a time when you would need to quote a citation. That would not be readily known. It's not something that you would know in and of yourself. And so to be ethical, you would need to cite a source for that information. Now let's talk about when you need a source citation. You might be adding a new source to an online tree that you own or that you're collaborating on, and anytime you're adding a new document or a story, you need to create a source so that others will know where that came from. You could be entering a source into your personal database, and you will want to make sure that you can find that source again. What about sharing a document with another researcher? You always want the source citation to go with a document so that it is clear what that document is and that someone else can relocate the document. If you're writing a family history book, then you'll want to have your book be credible. You'll want to be able to cite each fact so that future generations will know this was good research. If you're writing a proof statement or proof argument, it's very important to cite every fact, or else your general readership will not be able to follow your steps and they will not believe what you are writing. And finally, if you're writing an article for publication, every quarterly will require source citations. Excellent source citation and documentation begins with the research, not the writing. So when do we create our source citation? The first time we look at the source as we are researching. Let's look at some examples of sources and source citations. So what actually is a source? We can define it as a document, book, article, microfilm, photograph, website, etc., something that gives you information which becomes evidence in proving a conclusion. In this example, we see a document, but it has no source citation attached. Without that source citation, you would not know what this document is. You would not know how to relocate it. A source citation identifies the specific location of a source and details about that source. So now take a look at the source citation that was for the previous source document. See if you can gather enough information out of this to understand what that document was all about. Thomas B. Royston, DeKalb County, Alabama, cash entry file, witness statement, state volume patent number 5909, Lebanon, Alabama Land Office, land entry papers 1800 to 1908, record group 49, records of the Bureau of Land Management, National Archives, Washington, D.C. First of all, we know who this is about. This is about Thomas B. Royston, and we have a location. He's of DeKalb County, Alabama. What is this document all about? Well, it's a witness statement from a cash entry file. We have a number so that if we went to Washington, D.C., we could give the patent number, we would give them the record group number, and we would give them the title, the Land Entry Papers 1800 to 1908. So anyone could show up at the National Archives with this information. They would be able to have access to the original cash entry file that that document came from. Before you begin writing your research report, or if you're doing accreditation, your 4-generation report, it's important that you choose a style for your source citations. There are many different style guides out there that you can choose. ICAPGen does not require any specific style guide. When choosing a style, it's important that you look through the various style guides and choose one that's going to work for you. The Chicago Manual of Style is the essential guide for writers, editors, and publishers, and you may have used this in the past. Elizabeth Schoen Mills has written 2 excellent guides, basically using the Chicago Manual of Style, but incorporating genealogical type sources. Another guide is the MLA Handbook for Writers of Research Papers, or Kate Turabian's Manual for Writers of Research Papers, Theses, and Dissertations. So take a look at these different publications and choose one that's going to fit your needs the best. Once you've chosen a style guide, it's important to understand the components of a citation, which will be the same across all the different styles. The components of a citation include the author, title, publication, and location. Let's look at an example. This is an original record that is digitized online. When we look at this record, we're going to extract all of the important information, and on the right you can see that this was a land permit. This was taken at the land office at Noonensville under the Armed Occupation Act for the settlement in East Florida. It was for Arthur Dillard, head of a family who was a resident of Florida from July 1843. The land description is the southwest quarter of Section 25, Township 14 South, Range 21 East. So the first thing that we want to do in creating our source citation is to first take out all the information from the source so we know exactly what this document is about. Once we have done that, then we can start to create our source citation. And we're going to be looking for the author or creator of the source. Now, in this example of the land patent, the actual document was found on a website that did not say, first of all, who created this source. So we have to do some investigating sometimes, especially if this could be a photocopy that you have inherited and you don't know where the source came from. In this example, we have a frequently asked questions section that's going to give the answer to who the author or creator of this particular set of records is. Clicking on the FAQ section located the creator of this record, who was the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Now I know what to include as my author or creator for my source citation. Next, I have to cite the title of the source, or if it does not have a title, then I need to describe the source. In this example, up at the top left-hand corner, I have a title. This is the Armed Occupation Act Land Permits, and I have the individual that is described in this source. It's an entry for Arthur Dillard, 27 July 1843. So in this example, I have both a title of the source and I have a description of the source. It's very important to always describe the source. Be specific here. What is the specific date? Who is the specific individual mentioned in the source? Don't make the mistake of going too broad on your source citations. Each source citation should specifically detail the information that you are using in your research report. Next, you need to note the publication information. If you're looking at an online database, that would be the website. And you would include the date that it was accessed so that if you came back to your research, you would know when you last looked at this database in case new information had been added since then, or if you needed to try to relocate the database if it has since been taken down. We've all had examples where we go to look for a URL that we had once copied or used and it no longer is valid. And so we can use our access dates and the Internet Archive Wayback Machine to try to relocate those websites that have maybe gone the way of all old websites. Now you'll notice that I also included publication information of some numbers. I have the document ID number and a legacy doc locator number. That is part of the publication of this information on the website. And so I will include both of those because I'm not sure which one I would need in relocating the source. So if you're in doubt, it's always good to include too much information than too little information in a source citation. The next step in creating the source citation is to cite the location of the source. This is where you viewed the source. In this example, I viewed the source online, and so I would include the URL of the website. Notice that this is a pretty generic website URL. If it is a website that you are worried might go out of business or not be available, you would want to include the entire URL. If it's a website such as Family Search or Ancestry that is going to be there for a while, then you can do just the basic URL such as www.ancestry.com, then include enough material in the source citation that you could easily find that collection and the exact image again. Here you will have to use your judgment as to whether you should use the complete URL or if we can use a shortened URL. Now let's take a look at the finished citation for the document that I showed you previously. In red, we have the author or the creator of the source. It was the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Next, in purple, we have a description or a title of the source. Armed Occupation Act of 1842, Florida Land Permits, entry for Arthur Dillard, 26 July 1843. Notice that this is specific, giving the name of the individual and date. Next, in green, we have the publication information. We have the detail that this is an online database. We have the numbers to locate it within the publication, which is the website, myflorida.com. And then lastly, we have the location where I viewed this source. I have the URL and the date that I viewed it. An important part of your source citation is to use correct punctuation marks, which I have noted in black in this example. Notice that I have used commas to separate all the various components. We have quotes around the title. We have publication information in parentheses, and we end with a period. So if you are using a style guide, be very careful to check the accurate punctuation of the citations that you are creating. Our second example is a derivative record from files. You may have many photocopies of records or sources that you need to create a source citation for. So what do you do in a case like this? Well, the first thing to do is closely examine the source and note all the information that is included in the source. This will start to give you the information that you're going to need for the source citation. This example is a marriage record for W.H. Schultz and A.D. Rayston. The date is 11 December 1898, Indian Territory, Southern District. Notice in the middle that I've highlighted that this document is a certificate of a true copy. This certificate of a true copy was created in March of 1943 by Willie Maddox, the county court clerk of Carter County. So I have various things that I'm going to need to note in the source citation for it to be accurate, reflecting this source document. So again, looking at the components of a citation, the author, title, publication, and location information, we're going to create a citation for that marriage certificate. Let's talk about some different examples for author of the source, and then we'll go look at what we created for that marriage certificate. So when we're looking at author of the source, this is the author of an article, book, or other publication. Or it's the creator of a record, which is often a religious or government entity. And in our genealogical work, this is often what we're going to be using as the author or creator of our source. It could be an informant in an interview. If you have interviewed an elderly relative, then they are going to be the author or the creator of the source. In our example, Carter County, Oklahoma was the author of the source. We don't use specific names of court clerks for the author. Instead, we use the government entity, which in this case was Carter County. Next, we have the title or description of the source. If this is a published work, then we are going to have a specific title, a title of a book, an article, or a journal, and a website. Published works are generally italicized. An exception to this would be if you are quoting a chapter from a book. In that case, the chapter from the book would you have quotations around the title, and the actual title of the book would be in italics. Again, check your style guide to be sure that you are correctly using the appropriate punctuation and italics, and that you are being very consistent with your usage. If it's an unpublished work, such as a personal history, an interview, a collection of loose papers, a birth registration book, or an online database, you can use quotes around the title. But if it's not titled, you can describe the record. You may have many works in your personal collection that don't have titles, and so you will just need to create your own description of what that source could be. In the example that I'm showing you, there is no specific title for this marriage certificate. So I have created a description. It's the copy of an original marriage license and certificate. And notice that I have gotten specific here with the Schultz-Rayston names. Now, publication of the source is going to refer to a specific year and a date. If this is a published book, then a year will suffice. If it's a journal or magazine, then you want to add the month or the season. If it's a website, we will add the access date because URLs can change. The date could help us to relocate the source. If it's an unpublished source, we can use the date of creation, or we can use the date of the event it reports, or both. In this example, I had two dates. I had the date of the original creation, 11 December 1898, and I had a date of the Certificate of True Copies creation or publication, which was in 1943. Always think about how you're going to relocate this record in creating your source citation. If I just put down the 1943 date, that would not be useful for me or anyone else to try to relocate that record. The county clerk currently of Carter County, Oklahoma, is going to need the exact date of the original marriage to find that original certificate. So both dates are helpful in this source citation. Now we have to think about location of the source within the book or database. If it's a published source, this is quite easy. We simply note a volume or a page number. If it's an online database, we can cite the image number, or we may need to actually cite the waypoints or the way we got to that database. For instance, if you're working in Family Search, you might have had to drill down through several levels to find the actual database or the microfilm, the digitized microfilm that you're using. So you would want to cite those waypoints to help another researcher to follow your path. A good way to test your citation is to give it to another researcher or a family member or a friend and ask them to find the document. If they can find it quickly, then you know that you've created a good source citation. What about locating a source within a collection? You may need to use the government certificate document number, and there may be multiple document numbers. So if you are in doubt, again, use all the document numbers or use your common sense. If it's an unpublished source, it's important to identify some type of an order and describe it. For instance, if you're in an archives and they have created different folios for collections, then you'll want to cite those exactly. Tell where within that collection is the document that you're referring to. In my example, there was no information whatsoever on the document. There's no certificate number. And if there is a way that this is organized in the county courthouse, there's no indication of it. So as a last resort, you can use unpaginated. But again, use that as a last resort. Now we have to think about the location where the source can be accessed or viewed. If it's published source, so this would be the publication place. If it's the website, it would be the URL, as we discussed previously. If it's an unpublished source, this is where you can go to physically view the source. This could be the files of Diana Elder in my case, or it could be the repository that you went to. Is it an archive? Is it a library? Where can the source be viewed? In our example, we have two different locations where the source can be viewed, and I included both because, again, this is an unusual source. It can be viewed current day in Ardmore, Oklahoma, which is the county seat of Carter County, but I also wanted to include the Indian Territory Southern District because that was historically where this source could be found, or who originally published the source. So again, this is a tricky document, and many of the documents that we use in genealogy research are tricky and difficult, and so we need to really think through how we're going to create our source citations and think if we have covered all of the various elements of a source citation. Now we have many citations now that we use that are layered citations, and this is the term coined by Elizabeth Shown Mills to describe digital sources that contain digital images of original records. So this can seem confusing, but I'm going to show you an example that will help to clarify this. So in a layered citation, we include all the physical source citation, then all the digital source citation information, separating the two sections with a semicolon. Punctuation is very important here because it helps us see the different sections. Now you might want to use a third section if you're referencing the original microfilm reproduction of the source. For instance, if you're using digitized microfilm on Family Search, it's very helpful to note the original microfilm so that you can quickly go back to that just using the Family Search catalog. Here's what a layered citation looks like. In this example, I've got 3 different sections. The first section is the physical source. So think of it this way. If you were to go into Mason County, Kentucky, into their county courthouse, you would be able to look at a book called Marriage Bonds, Book 4, 1855 to 1857. And then you would be able to flip through that book, find the Scott-Frank bond, which is dated to September 1857. If you were just looking at this record at the county courthouse, that would be a sufficient source citation. But I did not look at this source at the county courthouse. I looked at this on microfilm on Family Search. So in blue is the second part of the citation where I looked at it online. You'll see that I noted it was a database and digital images, and the title of the collection is Kentucky Marriages 1797 to 1954. I've noted the image location, the image number, showing me where within this microfilm the record is found, and I have the publication of Family Search and the location with the URL. Then lastly, I have the microfilm number, so that if I wanted to relocate this record, I could go straight to the microfilm. I have that it's image 305, and I could very, very quickly get to this specific record. It's important to know that different citation formats are used depending on the project. We have reference notes, which can be either footnotes or endnotes. We have shortened reference notes, and we also have the source list entry. So let's look at some examples. Reference notes prove a fact such as a date or place of an event. They're used in genealogy databases, research reports, and publications. And this is what you include when adding a new source to Family Search or Ancestry or another online tree. Reference notes come in 2 formats. The first is footnotes. These are inserted throughout the article, referenced by number and appearing at the bottom of the page. This is the format that genealogists favor because it's nice to be able to look down at the bottom of the page and see the complete source citation that refers to the fact that you stated above. Also, if your report gets printed and the pages get separated, the citations are going with the page. If, however, you are writing an article or a book for publication, the house style might be endnotes. And in this case, you would also have numbers inserted throughout the article referring to your citations, but instead of being at the bottom of the page, they would be listed at the end of the chapter, article, or book. Good examples of this can be found in books, historical books, that at the end of each chapter is a list of all the references. Amy Harris said that footnotes should demonstrate the research steps and show that the information came from reliable sources. So we need to always remember that the whole reason for our citation is to show where we have been and what we are proving. Let's look at an example of a reference note in a book format. This is one of the very easiest citations to create, because a book format is very straightforward. First, we have the author, Thaddeus Brockett Rice. Then we have the title, History of Greene County, Georgia, in italics because it's a publication. And then in the parentheses, we have publication information, the place, the company, and the date. And then lastly, we have the specific page that is referred to in the research report. So for instance, in my research report, I cited a fact about Greene County, Georgia that I did not know and that was not commonly known, I would need to create a source citation. I don't want to plagiarize Thaddeus Brockett Rice by using his words as if they were my own. So I would be placing in quotes his information, then I would be creating the source citation, and I would have a reference note at the bottom of my research report citing him as the creator of that statement. If I used more information by Thaddeus Brockett Rice, if I restated, or if I used another bit of fact from that same page, I would not need to do a complete reference note. I could do a shortened reference note. And in this case, I would only have his last name, the title of the book, the place of publication simplified, and the page number. Now, a sourceless entry is also known as a bibliography. It's a master list of books, microfilm, or other sources that we have used for our research. This is generally placed at the end of a book or an article. It does not specify page numbers. It is saying, I have used this information in writing this book or in writing this article. It doesn't apply to specific facts that you have talked about in your writing. It's formatted just a little bit differently. So you'll notice that now we have the surname first, then a comma, then Thaddeus Brockett. We have the title still in italics because it's the publication, and we still have the publication information of place of the company and the date. What is different? Punctuation is different in the sourceless entry. Instead of the commas that separate the elements, we have periods separating things. No longer do we have the parentheses around publication, and we do not have a specific page number, because in this example, if this was a sourceless entry, this would be located at the end of an article or a book, saying that we use this book as a source for information, but we're not citing direct quotes, and we're not citing specific information from this book. Here's an example of what a source list looks like. The reason we use last names first is so that we can alphabetize a source list. So you'll notice the alphabetical listing of the various sources here. You'll notice that everything is divided with periods, and that we have all of the books in italics because they are publications. Tips for accreditation candidates. If you are applying for accreditation and you're working on your 4th-generation project, then here are some things that will really help you as you work. Remember that no specific style format is required by ICAPGen, but be consistent with the style formats throughout the project. What this means is that if you cite the website Find a Grave in one way, then make sure you continue to cite Find a Grave throughout your report in the same way. So how do you do this? A really good way to be consistent with your style format is to create a citation template. Use this especially for commonly used sources, such as a census. If you are in, say, Germany and you're using parish registers over and over, you'll want to create a template for how to consistently cite the information from a parish register. If you're in the United States, you're going to want to have a template for each census year. The United States Census can be a little tricky to cite. You may think that you need to lead with your citation always saying United States federal government because they are the creator of the census. But when the creator of the census and the title of the census is the same, then you don't need to do both. So you can simply write U.S. Census, population schedule, and then go on with the rest of your citation. So if you have doubts about how to do that, a good source to see how to cite censuses is Elizabeth Schoenmail's work. Make sure if you are working on accreditation that your citations in all of the parts of your project match. This would be the report, the research log, your family group sheet, pedigree sheet, and documents. You're not going to want to have the census cited one way in your report and cited a different way on the research log. So how do you accomplish this? First of all, you should avoid cutting and pasting from websites with improper templates. Different websites have different citation formats, and because you want yours to be stylistically the same, you're going to want to have your own template, and you're going to want to create your own source citation, even if it's really easy to just grab a citation that's ready-made from a website such as Family Search or Ancestry. So a good way to do this is to create your citation in your research log as you're researching. And then as you are writing your report and entering information into your genealogy database, you can copy and paste that complete citation from the research log into the various parts of the other parts of your project. If it's created correctly once in your research log, then copying and pasting it will make sure that you have got all of your citations matching across your project. You're going to want to be sure you include citations for negative searches. As you're writing your research report, you're going to want to show that you have done a good scope of research by saying something like, I searched for marriage records in Kentucky in these sources, but there was nothing for the particular couple. And then your source citation could show your negative searches, the various databases, books, or records that you searched. ICAPGen will be looking for negative searches in your report and specifically on your research log. So make sure that as you are searching, doing your research for your project, that you are including all of the locations where you did not find information for your project. You want to use the full citation the first time that you create your source citation in your report, and then you can abbreviate and use the shortened citation in subsequent listings. An important thing to note is to not do this until the entire report or article is complete. Then you can create the shortened citations. The reason for doing it this way would be if you create your report and you create shortened citations and then at the last minute you decide to rearrange sections of your report, then things will be out of order and you may have a shortened citation before the first full citation. So always create shortened citations at the very end when you are certain everything is in the correct order of your report. Remember that careful attention to the style and content of citations is the badge of an advanced genealogical researcher. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation on source citations and documentation, and I wish you the very best of luck as you go forward in citing all of your sources. Thank you so much for listening.